Hey there, Ron Sullivan, your online hitting consultant. I want to talk about Bo Bichette's lower half. And I want you to, for those of you that have young players that are learning the game, and you want to understand, how do I teach my player how to be more explosive? A lot of people think, hitting it's all in the hips. But, what we do to create potential energy I think is the most important. So first we have to look at what kids do, and we're going to go back here to the start of Bo Bichette. This is his nose stride on the right that he sometimes goes to. I read an article where he says he goes to this at an 0-2 count, or if he's not seeing the ball well, certain ballparks can't see the ball well, or if he has a difficult time with the pitcher seeing the ball out of his hand, he'll go to a nose stride move like this. But I want you to see the move that Bo Bichette and players that have power do that your kid is probably not doing. So kids start, much like anybody at the plate, we start with our hips neutral. So right now, if you put a pole across hip bone to hip bone, you would see it pointing directly out in front of him. And so when we teach load to kids, and I think as a first step, this isn't a problem at all. We teach them a timing move, right? So they're going to get some weight back. And what you'll see with kids that don't have a lot of pop, they move this neutral hip position straight back. They maintain the neutrality of the hips. So they stay hip bone to hip bone straight ahead, and then they move the weight back, and the hip bones stay in the same exact position. They just put more weight back here. Again, fundamentally, that could be good for just creating timing, but no, everybody wants more power. And so where is Bo Bichette getting power from? And this is going to be a characteristic you're going to see of any player that has power. Some guys are going to be a little bit more extreme than others. This is Bo Bichette's natural move. He does a little bit of a leg kick here. I want you to watch when he's doing his nose stride move. I'm going to clear this off. You're going to see basically the same action. Ready? So he goes back. Wow, that's way too slow. Here we go. Now, what do powerful players do that your young player probably is not doing at this point? Is the most important part to me of a load is, well, A, timing, and then B, in combination with creating potential energy. We're storing something up here so we can put it through the ball, right? And one of the things that powerful hitters do that kids don't typically do is create internal rotation for the hips. And you'll see this with Bo Bichette. Sometimes I'll tell players, and this is a very common thing you hear these days, turning the back pocket towards the pitcher. Well, if you just twist your hips on top of the ground, that's really not going to do it. It really has to come from here. This feeling has to come from this point. And one of the things that players that have really good internal rotation do is exactly what's happening over here on the ground. Notice the internal rotation of his laces here and the knee's internal rotation, right? This is going this way, right? That's helping. Now I have to have leverage here to help the back pocket go that way. So internal rotation of the hips is extremely important for unloading. Now, the next step is where you can teach a kid to do this. You can teach a kid to twist their hips or internally rotate their hips, but where it goes wrong for kids is that they don't understand that just creating this and then throwing it open as I'm going forward is the goal. That's what anybody naturally will do. They'll say, okay, I've twisted my hips. Now I'm going forward. I'm going to start unwinding my hips. What your job is to create explosiveness is to maintain internal rotation for as long as possible. Now, one of the challenges I have as an instructor with people that have video nowadays, and they're saying, yeah, but look at this guy, his hips are throwing open and so forth. Here's what I want you to do. You can always watch a professional hitter in 3 different stages. You can watch them on a tee, right? You can watch them in BP when somebody's throwing 70 miles per hour to them, and then watch them in a game. And what you see are stages of athleticism and differences in our reaction to those environments. So I'm pretty sure if you saw Bo Bichette on a tee, you would not see him throwing his hips open. Now, I'm going to show you something that's really important that we tend to gloss over these days because we watch the hip action and everybody's getting them hips open. We talk about kinetic chain where the hips have to fly open. But the real secret to having power is creating internal rotation, maintaining internal rotation, and what you'll see really good hitters that are powerful do is when they get to the ground, when the front foot lands, you can see this right now. Let me see where his belt. you can see right now that his belt buckle is right across the plate as he's landing. If you introduce an internal rotation cue to a player, they already naturally want to externally rotate their hips. So they're going to, in this process, they're going to constantly be externally rotating. You can see in this phase of the swing that he's trying to prevent external rotation. How do we know that? Because the laces are still kind of pointing this way. You can see that big time over here is nose stride. Another player that's really good at this is Bryce Harper. They maintain internal rotation for as long as possible. We're not trying to go from here and let my hips fly open. That's not the goal of a good hitter. We're trying to maintain this so that when I do get to the ground, right, there's a relationship between what the body, once I get to the ground, the relationship between what the body is doing in terms of the lower half rotation and the barrel have a connection. If you just throw your hips open, or if you go into external rotation immediately in this phase of the swing, every advantage you've created in terms of creating potential energy is gone. So you want to teach your player how to internally rotate their hips in this phase of the swing. And sometimes a little knee pinch like this can do that, but that's not the secret. The secret is, can you maintain that? I mean, look at this position that his back leg is in. You rarely see this with kids. You'll see that their leg is constantly in a state of straightening out because that's helped support external rotation. With this flexion right here, this is evidence that he's trying to maintain presence in his backside. This is why good coaches will say things like stay back, because this is the mechanism that I want to unload with. I don't want to go and gain ground for the sake of gaining ground forward. That's not the goal of any good hitter. Maintain, or I should say, create internal rotation and teach your player how to maintain internal rotation for as long as possible, and you'll start the building blocks for creating more explosiveness.